out that nearly 3 million students every single year enroll into a higher education institution, whether that be a 4-year college, a 2-year vocational school, or any types of trade skills job. And what I found out was that 38% of students every year drop out due to financial reasons. If you take 38% of 3 million, that's almost about 1 million people who are dropping out because they cannot afford their college tuition. Many of these people are disadvantaged, live in low-income communities, and have no other option to higher education if they don't have access to financial support or aid. When I was looking into this, I found that education holds a really high standard in the United States. From very early on in our history, we've taken this higher education and put it on a throne that everyone must go to succeed in life. Yet somehow we came from this point where we funded education heavily and placed good investments to now where we have millions of college students in debt that possibly will never get out and are defaulting on their loans. Looking at other developed nations and some up and coming, I saw that they've started to implement free tuition programs. So I wondered why not here? So I looked at the history, possible solutions, and the outcomes to them to see where we could head in the future. So to define my point, I needed to define a tuition. What I'm arguing is not to cover all college costs. That would cost the United States a tremendous amount of money. But what I am advocating for is for tuition costs to be covered, which is a sum of money that is charged for someone to be taught at a higher ed education, college or university. So that means your in-class time, that's tuition. So to start off with this presentation, it's really important to start thinking about the history of college. Where did this popularity come from? So in this graph, you can tell, if you guys don't know what the GI Bill is, it is a service act that for veterans that came back, for them to be provided an education, which was passed in 1994. From this chart right here, this is about where 1994 is. We can see a steady incline of people wanting to go to college because it was so accessible for so many people. It was estimated that about 8 million veterans that came back from war actually used their GI Bill, which was 10 times more than the US government ever expected. However, states quickly adapted and they brought in all these people because it was guaranteed funding to their universities. One chancellor from here in North Carolina, I forgot which university he said, we could bring them all in, we just can't build campuses fast enough. It shows the true demand of colleges back in the 1940s, going really into the 1990s, and then kind of ending in the 2000s. We also saw things such as the National Defense Student Loan, which is now known as your federal Perkins loans that some people still receive today. And we also saw the passing of the Higher Education Act of 1965, which provided access to women and minority populations, which really boosted up the population and popularity of college. However, this all had to come to an end. In 1970, the economy wasn't looking so well, and the government was forced to make cuts. Naturally, it went to higher education. Because college was so popular and already had this really mainstream thing of going, people still put themselves in debt. It wasn't an option for you not to go. And that's when we saw the popularity of loans start coming out and people getting themselves into debts. The investments, as you can see over time, have slowly dropped, starting from the 1980s, about when the start of the popularity and then just going down steadily. So today, what does this look like? Here's the student breakdown loan. Currently right now, there's $1.4 trillion in US student debt. Each second that students are in a classroom, it costs them about $3,000, and the average student debt is around $37,000. So by the end of this speech, it's gonna cost around $300,000 for you to hear me talk.
Yay.
Yay. I'm glad I could be here for you guys. So it's now time to think, what are we doing wrong in this country? What is hindering people from not going to college? Because these costs are astronomical. No one can be expected to pay this. And when thinking about this, if I was a student that had to pay this, I probably wouldn't be here. So, what is our national spending on higher education? Right now, it's estimated that we spend around $31 million providing aids and grants to higher education and providing them to public and private schools and charter schools all across the United States. In 2014, though, it was estimated that only at 4-year universities, that $51 million were collected for tuition. So where do we go from this point? Well, recently in the past elections, presidential candidates Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton proposed these new ideas, really spearheaded by Bernie Sanders though, to fund tuition dollars, to really up the investment in our higher education. So right now, these are what we're spending in the dark blue. Essentially what we would do is double that. It's estimated that Bernie Sanders' plan altogether would have cost this country $71 million, and a lot of people are backlashing against it because why should other people have to pay for public education? Why should I be responsible for paying your tuition bill when I don't pay anything to go here? It seems rather unfair. Well, think of this. Any millennial that graduates from college, on average, makes $17,000 more than their high school graduate counterparts. And I broke down the math. This is very simple math, so obviously tax code I'm not popular with. At a 10% tax rate, which is the lowest tax rate that any person will ever be taxed, in 30 working years, you make around $51,000, but the average cost of tuition is only $36 to fund a 4-year education tuition base. So when you break down the numbers, the government really makes more money than it will ever spend on a college tuition, thinking that they go to a 4-year tuition. This is obviously simple math. So now that we're thinking, okay, well, what more? Well, actually, it goes beyond that. Unemployment and job opening rates are very astronomically unbalanced. Right now, there are 6 million job openings in the United States, and there are 6.8 million people who are unemployed. If we can get each one of these people into a job, that'd be great. We would cut our unemployment rate literally, almost all of it. But the one big issue that employers are faced with is that there are not enough skilled college-educated people to fill these jobs. We've put our country in the situation where these people can't go get a college education because they can't afford it, and yet we can't fill the jobs that we need. So we're essentially having this high unemployment rate that's artificial, and we're hindering our GDP growth because we don't want to send these people off to college to fulfill those high-skilled jobs. So you may be thinking, okay, does this look feasible? There's so much opposition against it. People don't want to put taxpayer dollars into it. So why should we do this? Well, the American Tuition-Free College Program would really help students, especially in low-income situations, get these jobs, or have upward mobility in the future. When thinking about other systems that they have, there is one study by Adriana DeGron, a PhD student from Boston College, which looked at countries that do have current tuition-free programs, such as the Philippines and Chile, and they showed that they have really strong programs. They're able to send a lot of students, who wouldn't have had the chance to go. However, there's a lot of criticism that comes with it, such as a lack of equal funding, inequalities when it comes to distributions. So we have to ask ourselves, well, why should we do it in the US if these problems are being faced everywhere? Even in Germany, they're criticized because their higher education universities are seen as subpar. There are so many people in a classroom, and you don't have the luxuries that you see here on this really nice campus. Well, here's my idea. In Ecuador, they had a recent study where they actually restrict tuition dollars to certain places and to certain majors, and require entry exams for you to actually get tuition dollars to, in a sense, redirect tuition dollars to help the economy, such as job growth and where majors are needed and specialties. And it's worked really well. While they face criticism because tuition dollars are kind of held back from everyone, it's shown to really stabilize the country, and they have seen economic growth over the past couple of years. And this isn't to say that in America we would do the same. Obviously, people in Ecuador are allowed to do whatever they want. They can go to other tuition programs and go to private colleges if they so feel. But this is just an option for us to really stabilize and control our dollars, because we don't want to write a blank check every single year to all of America and say, good luck. But it's really important to realize that there is a vast difference between tuition dollars and college as a general. I'm really only advocating for us to have tuition dollars covered because it's the most reasonable and feasible cost. If you think about your whole time in college, your tuition dollars overall should probably be the cheapest thing, because all the other amenities that are added onto it are really luxuries and commodities. For you to have a really nice student union, for you to have a really nice CAF, those are all luxuries that you really don't need beyond your education. You came here to sit in a classroom to learn. So in conclusion, I actually took a quote from Lauren Asher, which is the lady in the striped shirt. I actually had the honor of meeting her one time. And she quoted, she is the president of the Institute of College Access and Success out in California, and she's a former president of this institution. And she states, "I'm discouraged that lower income students and families face such a big gap between the college costs they're asked to cover and what they're able to pay. This affordability gap has widened over the last decade. It reflects the high debt levels of the federal Pell Grant recipients, who most families have incomes under $40,000. This most recent data shows that 9 out of 10 college graduates who receive Pell Grants and loans, and they owe an average about $31,000. So it just shows the astronomical rates that we're putting people, even people where federal Pell Grants are meant to help very low income students. Those are very reserved funds. They even graduate in such astronomical debt that we ask ourselves, what are we truly doing for the people of America? If after this high education, if you reach the pinnacle of education, you're still asked to put yourself through a burdensome, life debt. It's also really important to remember that the access to higher education will strengthen the job market by increasing the number of skilled workers. We like to think that if we fund everyone's education, that a college degree will be seen as less valuable, but quite the contrary. Our country will benefit from having these high-skilled workers, and our GDP will grow, and we will all benefit as a whole. That simple breakdown of tax dollars really shows a higher return in investment, and that's what I like to think of this. Funding these types of programs aren't really us throwing dollars away, it's investing in our country. And overall, the cost of funding this would replenish over time, like I said. Tax dollars are meant to be used to aid the people in our country. We're not meant to be stingy with it. Obviously, we have to be a little conservative of how we use them, but nonetheless, I think that this investment is one that could really benefit our country for the future and help young people all across America. Thank you.